Hey folks, thanks for joining us for another episode of Construction Over Coffee. I have with me today Matt Ludwig from Matrix New World. Matt, super excited to have you on the show today. Welcome aboard.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here and quite an honor to kind of sit here and have a discussion with you.
It's my pleasure and it's my honor, Matt. Um, we're going to talk about some really exciting stuff today. For those that are tuning in, a little bit of background about Matt and Matrix. Matrix, he's the Director of Federal Services there. One thing really interesting about Matrix New World, their tagline, their headline is that they're solving national global challenges in water, climate change, energy transportation, infrastructure, with precision engineering and scientific ingenuity. That's what Matrix does. We'll let Matt talk more about that. Matt, give us a background of you. Give us that snapshot of you and how you got to where you are.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to. So I have an interesting career that's taken me, I'll say, kind of around the globe. I've been since graduating from college with a engineering degree in civil engineering. I started working actually for Matrix for about 3.5 years, and then took a little detour from working with Matrix and went to work for the Army Corps of Engineers, which gave me a big, I'll say, a vast experience on a lot of different diversified projects, whether environmental remediation type projects. And then I spent approximately 7 years overseas managing some of their military related projects and programs over in the Europe district. And then now I've returned back to New York to end up ultimately being the chief of construction for the New York district, which I had an amazing program. And now I'm back to working for the company I started my career with, leading the charge, doing similar work, just from a different lens this time around, more from the consultant side, and trying to solve the same problems. So my career is really brought me to a lot of different great locations, and I've been able to see a lot of great and interesting projects. And I love the construction and engineering field. It's solving difficult problems, implementing them, putting them in the field, and getting them done. And at the end of the day, you really get to see the fruits of your labor, and that's why I've really enjoyed my career. It's been exciting.
Awesome. Now, did you know, and we'll segue more in this later, but as a kid, did you know I want to go to college, civil engineering, get in the engineering field, or did that happen later in life for you?
I'll say from an early age, my father was an always do it yourself kind of guy. So, the first house that we bought that I can really remember, it was the house that was falling over, but it was what he could afford. And
Hmm.
so, we kind of joked that a heavy wind would have knocked it over. But, piece by piece, he started taking it apart, rebuilding it. And, my brother and I were hand in hand with him doing that. And I really enjoyed the hands-on experience of actually rebuilding and building things and salvaging things and just recreating. Then as I started through that path, it kind of came to that point where I was like, oh, I guess you go to college, and that was kind of the direction where my parents said, all right, let's go to college. You should go off to college. And engineering just seemed to be the natural fit for me. Was generally pretty good with math, enjoyed solving problems, enjoyed the analytics behind it. And
Hmm.
so off I went to school. I didn't realize, at the time I thought I would be an engineer, and what I soon realized early on, that crunching numbers and all that's great, but what I really enjoyed was being in the field, really kind of implementing the design, overseeing it, and then constructing it. And I really enjoy the construction aspect of it. And during the
Awesome.
summer to help pay for college, I worked for a mason. I did from the physical portion of it, because I do enjoy that aspect of it. So
A Mason. You must have been jacked that summer. Those guys do heavy work.
I, Jeff, I had muscles like you. That's changed a lot. That was it was a it was the hardest job. I probably never slept the best in my life, day in and day out. Lugging Simon forms around and knocking them down, putting them up was the every day. It was hard work, but I enjoyed it. I mean,
Yes.
being out in the weather, rain, hot summer days, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the physical nature of it, and then at the end of the day, you get to see your product, the fruits
Mhm.
of your labor, and I don't know if every industry has that same satisfaction that you get. And at the time, I was, my boss was nice, and allowed me occasionally to, all right, jump up on the excavator and start moving some things. So, here I am, a 19-year-old up on a 35,000-pound machine, getting to move things around, and it was fun. I got to play with the Tonka toys on a large scale at a pretty young age. So I
It's
think that was
awesome.
part of one of the inspirations to continue, going down that career path.
That's awesome. So you're at Matrix New World, working on really cool stuff. Came back to them. They were so good, you came back. And just from our previous conversations, you're working on some really cool, interesting stuff. Now, I know you can only share what you can share, but can you give us an idea of some of the initiatives, some of the projects, some of the things that you're involved in right now?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of, I'll call them climate resiliency type projects,
Mhm.
whether they're large. We have a large project right now where we're teamed up with a large wind port project.
Mhm.
We're also doing a lot of road raising and utility, which, if anybody's ever been in New York City and see some of the utility work that goes in, just imagine a pile of spaghetti and trying to sort it out. And then so that's some of we're dealing with a lot of also, I'll call them infrastructure projects, things that this country desperately needs right now, to kind of keep things in shape and moving along. Um, and then we
Mhm.
also do some, a large amount of environmental type work, whether it's remediation or, also just looking for when a commercial person's looking to revitalize a piece of property, and we
Sure.
go in and design and implement some of those remediation components.
Understood. Both of both of those sectors aren't even hot. They're just on fire right now. And it must be, I mean, imagine you folks must be straight out. It's just maybe you're turning down more than you're taking on right now.
It is. I will say this is a unique time in the industry right now. There
Mhm.
is a need across the board for um, trades to do the work,
Mhm.
engineers to design the work.
Mhm.
There's no shortage of projects right now. Every firm that we talk with and deal with, and general contractor, they're all busy. There's not a shortage of that. And then there's the challenges right now because everybody's so busy that where a lot of folks are fighting for the same resources, and that just adds a different level of complexity in it. We just there's the supply chain issue, but then it's the human capital to actually get it done, is where I tend to see a little bit more of the bottleneck. Projects are taking longer because you don't have all the resources that you can put to them,
Mhm.
and it kind of creates a bottleneck. So, and I also think with that, you're going to potentially have some of the quality is going to suffer a little bit, because you're not getting the experienced people, or there's so much work that there's almost a set of exhaustion level with trying to accomplish it.
Now, are you seeing the human capital, the people side is nuts right now, right? Everyone wants the same things. One of the biggest challenges that we saw really pop up in 2020 and continue for, at this point, my goodness, the next 3 years is on the supply chain side as well. Not only is everything more expensive, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's gotten more expensive, but the delay in getting that, in some cases, the delay may be several more days than usual, several more weeks, or even several more months, or even a year compared to what it was. And I'm curious if you're seeing that same supply chain delay continue.
Yeah, that has not let up. We still see that there are certain components that are, I'll call them vital switch gears,
Hmm.
components like that that are critical for building construction. We're still seeing the extremely long lead times, generators, backup generators, and,
Hmm.
and things like that. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of advanced purchasing, which adds a struggle because a lot of the work that the company has been focused on is a lot of design build. So we're trying to design the product that we're going to put in later on, but still meet the deadline of our clients. So it's add a certain level of complexity.
Hmm.
And I think also a lot of the suppliers and general contractors, they have a concern too, because you're signing a contract now for work that you may execute in 3 years from now. So what is that price escalation going to be? What's the impact to you? And nobody wants to go out of business, but you also want to make sure that your price is competitive. So it's definitely a challenge from that side of the business right now.
We're seeing a lot more firms attempting to lock in larger orders further ahead in time, where, just throwing numbers out, maybe they'd place an order for X 6 months out. And now it's, well, we want to place an order for X, Y, and Z 3 times our normal volume, and we want to place it 2 years in advance or 3 years in advance, depending on the project. And there's hesitation on the supplier side for sure, and then we notice there's hesitation on the owner side as well, because they hope they're doing the right thing, and they're hoping that ultimately the supplier will be able to deliver what they want at that price when the time comes. Um, the supply chain is an interesting one, and I don't think anyone would have seen this 5 years ago at this rate.
Now, I actually, I feel kind of bad for some of the companies that have signed contracts for larger, long-term contracts, not knowing or not seeing the impacts of what was going to happen. Steel prices went up, drastically. Wood, I remember, going into a local box store and seeing the price of a 2x4 was 3 times what it was months earlier. That seemed to have leveled out, but the impacts, I don't know if anybody can really, it's hard to calculate that, and it's a calculated risk that you're when you go in on these projects.
I remember watching lumber going from the mid upper 400s to when it went above 13, 14, 1500 in less than, we'll call it about a year, less than a year or so, saying, oh boy, this is going to be interesting, especially on the residential side. And then you had that dramatic drop off midway-ish through um, 2021, and everyone thought they were out of the woods. And then you had, another clean double, almost triple. And now things have kind of, it's settled back to that 2019-ish level, we'll call it 2018, 2019 level. But, that's just lumber, and no one knows, well, what happens next. And there's both sides of the table. People who thought they were getting a great deal, locking in long term at, 1200 a contract, surprise, no one knows. There's a lot of ambiguity. Um, I want to talk about the recruiting, well, the people side of it too, because you raise a point that almost everyone on our show has raised. The people side it's difficult. It's hard to find the right people. And for y'all, is it across the board? Is it, particular types of individuals, locations? Like what is the biggest challenge that you all are seeing?
Um, you know, I think it's as far as disciplines, on the engineering side, it's pretty much across the board. Um, and we've been able to get I'll say some good talent coming right out of college, but
Hmm.
there is to train them and get them up to the level to really kind of be operating independently, and that takes time. And so that mid level has been really kind of, I'll call it the pinch point right now.
Hmm.
And so that's been a little bit of a struggle from on the engineering side.
When you
From
say mid-level, what does that mean for
To
some of the
me,
guests
mid
that may
level,
think differently?
yeah. So mid level to me is someone with 5 to 10 years of experience. Um, and I think they can. There's a lot of opportunities out there, so that makes it challenging for firms to recruit the talent. I also think there was a bit of an influx where that level at that point, a lot of engineers were looking at other jobs, and you see that, you see it with school teachers. There's kind of an ebb and flow out of colleges, and I think we saw that kind of ebb and flow also, and it just happens to kind of correspond with this all of a sudden this massive infrastructure rebuild that the nation is trying to go after. So they're kind of colliding with one another at the same time.
Got it. It's interesting that like mid, almost like you could call it like a new senior or a mid-level, that 5 to 10, maybe 12 year. I want to talk about that for a minute because that's an interesting period of time for a lot of people, especially as you get closer to that 10 to 12 year. If you think of somebody who may have gone through a graduate program or an undergrad program, when they're graduating, let's say they have 10 years experience, that means they entered the field in 2013, 2012, right? And you think back 4 years ago, what were they doing at that time? Well, that was 2008, 2009. And what happened in 2008 and 9? The mother of all recessions for, especially for the residential, but the construction industry. And I don't think many people realize the implications that had. That was not only a recession, but for a lot of folks in the industry, I think it had a lasting mental impact where folks retired early. Some people left, and a lot of the architecture work was put on hold because there wasn't really new build or design going out there. And I think it scared a lot of people out of those industries,
Mhm.
for the next, we'll call it 5 years or so. So, from people graduating, people that started school in 08, 09, they get out, we'll call it in 2012, 2013, they have 10 years of experience under their belt. A lot of those folks switched majors, had trouble finding work, and switched careers. And it lasted, that hesitancy, I think, lasted 3 to 5 years, which is interesting because if you look at it, that lines up with, well, where are all the 5 and 10 year people? That period of time, we'll call it from 2008 to about 2012, 13, there was a lot of hesitancy for folks, going into the AEC world. And I mean, we're seeing it. We're seeing it in that 5 to 10 year mid-level, almost senior level person too. I'm curious if curious your thoughts on that too.
No, no, Jeff, you're absolutely right. That's the that you know c- construction has always gone through these waves, and
Mm.
I don't think at times we really feel the impact of those waves, of the high points and then the low points, and what they do to the industry until you know time periods later when we're either on the up cycle or on the down cycle. And I think we're going to see a large boom that's going to run for the next 5 6 years. I hope that we can encourage people to get back into this. What I'm fearful of is people are going to be inspired, and then the rug will get pulled out from underneath them. And so what would be great is a little bit more of a static line of nice solid growth in the
Yep.
industry. Instead, we're seeing these, because of these waves, you're seeing the attrition rate increase, and that's where the problem, or that I perceive the problem to be.
Agreed. Well, I think back, and you may remember this, there was a big push on the technology front, get more kids coding, right? Push people into coding, 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 great jobs, great careers, great pay, work-life balance, yada, yada. And there was this massive push for the last 5 years to push people into tech. Great. If it's for you, great. And then you've kind of looked at the wave of job losses, and they've primarily, we find, been focused around technology. And like you say, I look for this steady, consistent growth in construction because we'll call it maybe volatility of spikes in demand and in increased demand and waning demand. If you're on the wrong side of that and you're just getting started, it can feel overwhelming as well. And
Yeah, I mean, it becomes discouraging for people that are
exactly.
trying to get into a certain industry. And even if you're, even if you're passionate about something
Hmm.
and you can't find a job, you're, a rational person at some point is going to start looking for something else that's maybe a little bit more stable. And the construction industry, over the last, well, I mean, since I've been alive, the construction industry has not been as stable as what, I would like it to be. I always feel that there's work. It goes in these pretty high peaks and valleys.
Yeah, it does. Interesting enough, I think the last 10 years have been the most stable from a demand perspective, um, with the exception of I guess the last three, but you'd rather
Yeah.
see increase than less demand. But after that 2012, 2013 recovery period, it's been pretty steady. And then, it's like an EKG where you see this massive spike. And
Yeah.
ideally you want to see it just continue. Um, what do you think are going to be the biggest challenges around the the people side of construction when it comes to finding the right people, but also keeping them engaged and keeping them on board when people feel as if they have so many options because there is so much demand? How do firms stay competitive and keep those folks on board and make it an attractive place to even join in the first place?
So I think it starts early on, to really do that recruitment, and I would say a lot of folks were at one point they were focusing on people that were seniors in college, and I think that recruitment actually has to go back even further, and I think you need to be you know, trying to recruit kids in a freshman, sophomore year in high school. I
Yes.
don't ever remember my guidance counselor coming to me and saying, "Matt, you should become a Mason." That was
If
never
only.
even a word. Yeah, it was Matt, you got to go to college, and that's
Hmm.
the first I think first response for them. And I think that's an easy response. The other one is, yeah, you're going to be out in the snow. You're going to do this. But I don't think they're selling the quality and the joy of doing the physical work or
Hmm.
being involved in the industry. Um, I was at a recent trade show, and at the show, I think it was John Deere, had an excavator that people could climb up on and operate.
Nice.
And they had it was a giant simulator, and I was like, what a great way that if someone could bring that to the high school and to the grammar school level, where
Mhm.
these kids could pretend to be up and driving, and I think that would inspire people, and they would provide at least a lasting impression in the younger talent that's out there, to want to get into the industry. I don't think we sell how great of a job it is, to kids. I just feel like that is missed. It's the first easy step is, Jeff, you need to go to college, and it's not, hey Jeff, you want to build this monument, project and be involved with the rehabilitation of the Brooklyn Bridge, for instance, or anything like that. I think that's where we need to start going as a country. And I would even tell you that at the end of the day, I think the financials, if you look at it and laid that out, I think dollar for dollar, for the investment into college and versus going right into a trade school and learning a trade and all of that. I would say the numbers would probably speak for themselves.
Agreed. And for those that are listening at this point, we're not anti-college, right? Because some people I'll get messages and be like, you sound like you're so anti-college. We're not. We are, I think I may speak for you here, but it's pro do what's best for you. And if that's college, great. But if it's not, I don't think there should be this sense of it's the only way, it's the only obligation, because college has been pushed down every young kid's throat now for the last 20 or 30 years. And when I was growing up, there was three choices. College, trade school, work, or, enlist was another option. I think that would go in with work after high school. That was it. And, if you went to trade school, particularly, after middle school, that was the option. You basically go to high school or trade school. And then after high school, it's basically college or work, right? But, I remember the stigma in middle school growing up where the kids that went, the idea was that the kids that went to the trade school or the voc, the tech, whatever you want to call it, it was because, they couldn't cut it in high school or they weren't smart. Now, thankfully, coming from a blue collar family, a blue collar background, I knew much better and I knew it was, BS. But a lot of kids hear that and that stuff sticks with them. And they grow up thinking, well, the people who went to the voc, went to the tech, these people are going through high school and college thinking that those folks did it because they're not smart, they didn't have any other options, when in reality, the voc, the tech, trade school, whatever you want, it's preparing folks for a phenomenal career, a great quality of life, and setting them up to essentially be working 4 years earlier than most people their age. And those stigmas, they're unfortunate, they stick, and you see them played out all over in cartoons and movies and whatever. But growing up, that was the stigma. And I'm curious if, in your part of the world or at your time, was that also the case? Was there that stigma attached to that?
Yeah, no, Jeff, you're absolutely right. I will tell you the whole idea of if you went to the vocational technical school, you weren't smart, and that was really kind of attached to that.
Yes.
And I have friends that went to that vocational technical school and now they own their own businesses. One of them has done extremely well, I mean, to the highest level of he started out, and now is he's a multimillionaire because he went there, he learned a trade, he created a business, and now has 30 employees that work for him. And so here was the quote unquote not smart guy that went to the vocational school who is doing really well for himself, and is in the construction industry doing great. I'm not against college at all. I mean, that's not it. The higher education is wonderful. I wouldn't probably be where I am now if I didn't have the higher education that I went. But I did my concern and feeling is, or perception is, that that's the only alternative. And that's what I think, I want to, put out here, that there are other alternatives, and we should be having those discussions with students, people that don't know, they're impressionable at that age. So what do you want to do? And don't make it the stigmatism that you're the dumb kid that you went to the vocational school. So yeah, that I have the same impression when I was growing up, and not from my parents, but I'll say from the kids that I hung out with, and that was just kind of, if you went there, you weren't smart.
Yeah, no, I get that, and it's interesting too. I mean, you look at that how it starts, and then throughout the rest of someone's life, they watch the cartoons, right? If you're a kid, they watch the movies, and you think, how is the we'll focus on construction for a minute. It's an easy one, easy stigma. How do they typically portray someone in construction? Well, most people don't even know what an estimator is, and when you say project manager, they mean IT. No, they think of the individual swinging a hammer, usually a brutish guy, and his most interaction with other people is cracking jokes, cracking a beer, and catcalling women. And that is the stigma that I think is portrayed to the average person about construction, and that's what people grow up thinking. Well, that's how it is. You tell
Yeah,
somebody, hey, I'm a superintendent, they'd say, school system? No,
yeah.
a
Yeah,
job
no,
site, a project.
yeah, the titles, I think most people don't know what they are, and what their role is, and how a project actually gets put together. What's the difference between the foreman and the superintendent and the project manager and the quality assurance, quality control manager? What are all these roles? Um, that is, and as you know, Jeff, putting together and building these real complex projects, it takes a lot of, it's not an easy task. There's a lot of hands that are involved. There's a
Hmm.
lot of people involved with different little details that make the difference between from a mediocre project to this world class facility that we're honored to be able to build and walk through. I'm always amazed when I walk through buildings. I'm one of those people that walk around and I look at the trim and the molding, and I look at how the light fixtures were installed, or the masonry on the outside of the building,
Hmm.
and I look and think, man, somebody took pride in it and did it right. And then you can tell when someone who didn't know what they were doing did it also. And so I think it takes a special eye.
It
So
does. It does. Some of my friends that aren't in the industry, will go out and they'll comment on, oh, that looks so great. And then I look at it, I'm like, actually, I stopped doing it with them, right? But like, actually, when you look closer, you see this and this and this. And they're
right.
like, you ruined it for me. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I get it. I think that aspect of work is really mostly everything, right? But especially in that, it's really taken for granted. You go, you see, say you go to downtown New York and you see a beautiful um, structure, a beautiful building, and you say, oh, that looks cool. But you will stop and think about what goes into that. But the average person simply, they they have no idea as to what went into that and what needed to happen for it not only to look good, but to be considered a success. I mean, the amount of people that are needed to make it work, keep it on time, on budget, keep it safe, right? Because safety is a huge component that enough people don't talk about. Um, it's awe-inspiring in some cases. Simply, it's awe-inspiring, and I think for a lot of
Yeah.
people that are in the industry, when they can go by and say, "Hey, I was involved in this project and I did this on here or this on there," it's a cool feeling.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that, we sometimes people, when they think of construction, they just think of the mason, the electrician, the tin knockers. But there's a lot of other components that go into it. Is the individual that runs the schedule and builds that schedule typically has an IT background, and also understands construction. We have accountants that are involved on construction projects, lawyers. So you have every aspect, but it's a lot of people don't say, "Hey, I want to be an accountant for a construction company." And I think we could even kind of nudge those people in that direction, that a little bit more focused on the AEC community.
Agreed. Agreed. So all this is a build up to one of the, one of life's unanswered mysteries. And we hinted towards it, but how do we get that next generation excited? How do high school's good, middle school's good, but you know, things like the John Deere, great idea. What can we be doing in day-to-day life, in classrooms, at home? What can we be doing to get this next generation of people amped up and excited about this work in these fields?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was working alongside my father is kind of what inspired me. And so
Mhm.
that's the challenge in and of itself is, when I bring my kids, I'm like, do you understand how this is put together? And kind of talk them through the process. That's the parental part. But I think part of that is industry. So I'm already excited about it. And I think other people that are in the industry that are excited about it, it's more of, having the guidance counselors, the school teachers,
Mhm.
going and meeting with them, leaders in the industry, going and meeting with them and explaining, what the industry needs and trying to, you know, bring the kids. Most class trips are you go out and wander through the woods and stare at trees and when was the last time you saw a class trip that went out on a construction site? And I know, there's the safety aspect of it, but I think that in and of itself, if we could do more of that, bring them out and show them the concrete getting poured and, pumped up, 200 feet
Yeah.
up on a building and all of that and kind of talk to them about that, I think would inspire the youth to want to get into the industry a little bit more. Show them
Well,
the good parts of the job.
yeah, every they bring the kids to the zoo. Why not bring them to a job site, obviously safely? But I think you're right to be able to see that stuff and highlight the positives, which so often get overlooked. Um, that would be great. That would be phenomenal, and it really does need to start at a young age. Um, because people will say most kids have no idea what they want to do, but I think they've made a decision as to what they want to not do by the time they get to middle school. And even, or that maybe they've narrowed down the field to two or three things, but even giving them options is so important because you're lucky you grew up in it and you had an influence. I'm lucky I did too. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what the heck it was. I don't know. I probably would have ended up a doctor or something. I don't know. Now I'm giving
Yeah.
myself credit there, but maybe maybe an assistant somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think what excited, I brought my son, we had a very large blasting operation going on. And so I
Mhm.
brought him out to feel the rumble and see the explosion and basically said, all right, son, hit this button and watch and see what happens. And so, I tried to do something like that. A good explosion always inspires kids. I don't know. I had it. You got to start young. You got to let them see the benefits. You got to show them that they're creating a product that's going to last a lifetime, and kind of instill that hard work into them. It's not easy. I mean, at the end of the day, it is still work.
Mhm.
But if you can instill that certain work ethic in the youth and then inspire them, I think we'll see more people coming back into the industry.
Agreed. I would love to see, you know, um, when everyone thinks about professions, I think kids tend to think of what's admirable. And the idea of, if you're in healthcare, you're saving lives, which is great. If you're in technology, or finance, whatever that is, it's because you're smart and can do cool stuff. It's like, what could we do that would make construction, admirable? I mean, over the last 3 years, which has been great. Hey, let's think about our frontline workers. Cool. They were a very overlooked, underappreciated group of folks that, kept things running. And, to be able to position the AEC world in that light and to get that, I think that gratitude and that appreciation for the work that the men and women do, I think that would be excellent and nothing but, I think that would do nothing but great things for the industry, because I just don't see it. I just don't see that that same type of thought go into it. Call it a thankless profession, but I just don't see it. And it would be great to see that and get people start thinking in that term.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of, the emergency response type work that I've had the privilege to work on.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And that type of work is the most gratifying. Jeff's house got knocked down because of hurricane, and we're in there repairing and fixing it and getting the family back into that house. I mean, that kind of work inspires people because
Hmm.
it is impactful. The
Hmm.
health, as you mentioned, the healthcare workers, over the past few years, that is inspiring. So
Yes.
yeah, I think that's one of the challenges to show why what you're doing is so important.
Hmm. One of my favorite stories that I think back to, and I like to tell, is, you look at 9/11, right? And we look at the first responders, we look at the medical team there, and then what came after that is the individuals who were literally responsible for rebuilding that city. Hats off to them. You look at some of the devastation we've had from natural disasters, hurricanes, flooding. You look at Katrina, Matthew, you look at where these areas were just completely ravaged, and it's essentially, they become a ground zero there. And the people who go and rebuild and revitalize those communities, that's inspiring. And I think of that, and to think that folks can do that as quick as they do, with as much care as they do, and to bring, what would be a ravaged community, to bring it out of the shambles and back to a revitalized, engaged community that people can get excited about. That's awesome, man. That does it for me. I think of that, it's like, wow, not many people can do that.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% on that, Jeff. And um, it's how do you display, the before and then the after. Here's what it was, and then here's what the industry was able to do to revitalize and bring it back. And it goes back to taking pride in your work. I still drive down, there's the first I ever worked on. And I still think back 25 years ago now that structure is still there, and I had a hand in it, and was involved with the design, and then actually got to oversee the construction on it. And for me, that's a cool feeling. I mean, it's not this enormous project, but it was my first. And so that's kind of, for me, that's a little bit of the inspiration. So how to start that earlier so that it'll stay with them, so that they can follow that through in their career, is the challenge.
One idea we've tossed around with firms, across the AAC spectrum, is a bigger emphasis on bring your kids to work day. Surprisingly, not a lot of firms do it. And if they do, it's maybe once a year, but get something on the year, once a quarter or twice a year. Bring your kids to work day. Make it a big deal. Bring your kids and your kids' friends if they're interested to work day, so that you see what you can do. And it sounds so elementary or rudimentary, but starting something even as small as that, so they can see what, mom or dad does in the day of the life, or what, their buddy's parent or parents do in a day in the life. I think that would go a really long way. And we're encouraging firms to start doing that if they're not. And if they are, try twice a year instead of once. See what the results are. Kids get excited about that stuff, because then they go tell their friends, hey, I saw what mommy and daddy did today, and it's really cool. That's stuff I think can get kids
No,
excited too.
you're right. It seemed to be years ago that was a little bit more of
Hmm.
a push to do that, and then it seems like that has kind of slowed down, and it's more of the kids come, or the the parents come to the classroom. And to me, what's I think more inspiring is that road trip or to the project site, and that's they truly get to see it. I think it's different when you're in a classroom setting versus out on the site or in the design room looking at plans and understanding a little bit more of the complexity of when you're running a BIM model and the clash detection on that. For some people, like, what is that? You talk about it, but until you see the model moving around, and understand and explain how the piping system works, I think that's much more impactful.
Agreed. Agreed. Anything that can get that next generation excited, talking about their friends, viewing it in a positive light, and kind of saying, oh, this is what actually goes on. It's not just what I see in the movies or on TV would be great. Um, let's shift topics for a moment, talk about technology and what's changing. One thing I love about construction is, there's that old school work ethic of, hey, we're going to do this no matter what it takes. One thing I find challenging, and I guess it goes for all of these and all the AEC world, is okay, great work ethic, but if you look at industries as a whole, the AEC world is not exactly the most it's typically not the most welcoming to change. It's why would we change it? We've done it this way for years. Now that has started to shift over the last few years. We've noticed, especially with some of the larger firms, but as a whole, they are not typically not the most. This industry is not the most tech savvy or forward thinking. Now there's exceptions, but this is typically the rule. What are you seeing out there that's been exciting on the technology front?
Yeah, no, I agree that the industry, the way we build structures back in the Pharaoh times to the way we do it now is in some
Mm-hmm.
ways the same. What I have found really interesting in the industry that I think has made a much larger impact is really the BIM modeling, and from the design standpoint, I always remember, it was always a struggle on pretty complex buildings, was running all the mechanicals, getting all your MEP and everything to fit within certain spaces. And now with the technology and the design, you can see it. You can run these clash detections to determine what's hitting what, and you can make the adjustments in advance, basically from a computer, to then go back in, and it helps the install to be a lot smoother. I find that really interesting. And then some of the AI work, the artificial intelligence work that's going on the building operation and maintenance side of the house, and it is, I think, pretty interesting in where that part of the industry is going. And that's more, I'll call it more on the O&M side. But
Yeah.
it's really exciting on, predictability, on breakthrough, on filters, and all of that preventive maintenance that's happening in advance, is really, really interesting.
Yeah. I think back, where were people first exposed to that on a big, like wide scale sense? And I, I'll joke about that and say, well, it was when that Nest thermostat came out, and people didn't have to think about when could I turn up the temperature or turn it down. And, it was smart enough that it figured out based on my usage history and was someone here or there. But in that commercial world, in the building automation systems world and the operations and the maintenance, that stuff is fascinating. And on the BIM world, on another note, the BIM world, to me, the change that has occurred in the last 5 years in that space is wild. And I often compare it to, um, are you are you still at the company that is still using filing cabinets, or are you with the times? And with BIM, are you doing it this way, or are you still stuck in the 1990s and doing everything via filing cabinet? That space really excites me, and I'm like, man, how did we do this X amount of years ago without this stuff. It's wild. I
Yeah,
mean, don't get me
I
wrong,
remember. Yeah.
the buildings look good, but now it's like, wow, this stuff's crazy.
Yeah, I remember the days with overlaying mylar sheets over top of one another to to kind of do that with all the different trades, and now with the modeling aspect of it, it's so much easier, and you can be working. The other thing is Jeff can be in Florida working on it, and I can be up in New York, and Laura could be out in California, and we can all be working on the same model, talking to each other,
Real
through
time.
at real time, as opposed to, hey, Jeff, I'm going to send you a fax, and
Imagine before faxes, hey, I'm gonna send you the plans in the mail, or you're gonna come here
right.
to see it. How did
So
anything get
I
done?
think that's one of the advancements from the design side. In the field, we're starting to see a lot more on the material side, and I think that when that starts really progressing, I think we're going to see some drastic changes on our building envelopes to keep them a higher insulation factor, and all of those components. So material science is a whole different piece of the construction industry that has been, I'll say it's been a little bit slow, but you're starting to see some more advancements on that.
Yeah, yeah. The way that the way they build out certain materials and the materials they use and the way things have shifted over the years, it's wild. What do you talked about AI, which is interesting. It's crazy to me. Right now everyone's obsessed with the Chat GPT AI and how it can write stuff on the AEC world. You talk about BIM, you talk about AI. Is there anything in particular you have your eye on that you think should be watched over the next couple of years
Say that again,
specifically?
because my door slammed and I
No
couldn't hear it.
worries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Is there any specific piece of technology software that you really suggest people narrow in and pay attention to over the next couple of years?
I don't know if there's one, like, all, because this is such a new and budding thing. There's a lot of
Mhm.
different people that are trying different things, and so I don't think that there's one in particular. But I do think that the building control and modulation aspect of it, and then the preventative maintenance, and I think that preventative maintenance is part of why we see a lot of our structures failing sooner, and they're not getting their full life cycle out of them. And I think if we can get in front of that, utilizing AI, we're going to actually extend the life cycle on our buildings, and ultimately provide a better product for customers at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity too for, contractors and folks at different stages of that use and installation and maintenance cycle. I think there's a way for those folks to capitalize on that too, if they can build in AI and predictability and insert themselves in that process somehow. The firms that will really knock out of the park will figure that out. They'll get in front of it and they'll tie themselves into that maintenance cycle with AI, which is going to be really cool. Um, Going forward, are there any significant changes you see to the industry you work in? Maybe not on a technology level, but regulatory, other different. Is there any like significant changes coming your way in your world anytime soon? With the
One,
exception
yeah,
of maybe, some more bills will pass and infrastructure will, more money will pour in. What else?
I think some of the autonomous construction, that's going on right now. So um, the automated driving of trucks, and how we can load and cycle things, um, is for me is pretty interesting. To just think that you could run a mining operation and not, you could run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and safeguard people, that are not in these, precarious situations, and allow for automated vehicular traffic. I think, to me, that's pretty wild. I also think, they're trying to do more of this, which is changing the industry, because
Hmm.
now you're getting into more, I'll call it, the robotics of how to construct things, and there's still that personal touch that I think will always be needed on a
Hmm.
project. But I do think that there's certain things that are a little bit more simplistic. You can get a better production, and execute the projects in a faster, more efficient, and safer timeline.
Agreed. I'm looking at the time. I realize we're bumping up on that hour. Is there anything you want to share with our audience here?
Uh,
Anything you want to talk about in particular?
Now, I would just say, Jeff, as I probably said it early on, it's an amazing industry. We need to inspire
Mm,
the youth to get into it. I can't say, I've absolutely loved what I've done throughout my career. And I think if you talk to almost everybody, that there's projects that they are so proud of, that they've worked on, the challenges that they had to overcome. It's a great industry, and it's going to continue to grow. And as people, are retiring, and fewer people are, kind of entering, I think the possibilities from all different types of disciplines, not just the engineering, but from the accounting and the legal aspect, and even the
hmm.
contracting and scheduling. There's so many components of it that I don't think is, showcased enough. And that needs to happen. I love what I do, and I just want other people to be inspired, by the industry, and then, come join us on a site tour, and I'll try to inspire you to get into the industry.
Awesome. Well, Matt, greatly appreciate it. This was awesome. Great conversation. I think even better than our first call.
Yeah.
Um, Appreciate you coming on the show. If people want to reach you, what's a good way for them to reach you?
You can reach me, at Ludwig at mnwe.com. That's Matrix New World Engineering. And or just look us up, Matrix New World Engineering, and you'll see all of the company's contact information there, my contact information. Jeff, I really
Excellent.
appreciate the time here
Thank you.
today, and it's been great. So thank
Thank
you.
you. All right. Thank you.